From Unity of Houston, Texas, this is the Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational spiritual community providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress now with Reverend Howard Caesar.
There was a question that was once asked, maybe you've asked it, maybe you've heard the answer. Why did Moses really have to wander in the wilderness for 40 years? And the answer comes that, well, they didn't have GPS back then, and also back then, even then, a man refused to stop and ask for directions. All right, don't be too happy about that. Because it really has a point, and that is on the spiritual path, whether you're a man or a woman or wherever you are, what stage of life, we are all required to stop and to pause and to turn within and ask for direction. That there is a presence and a power that we have access to if we'll only go to it, if we'll look to it. Because it is really the one power that is there to offer us help and strength and guidance. And I need that, don't you? There have been many instances in my life I have, and I've called on that. And so every person has had times in their life where they found themselves in a situation or a set of circumstances where they were confronted with something that was unsettling and where there was uncertainty, and they felt uneasy about their life and what it was that they were being confronted with. And so there are times when the situation is such that we don't know our way. We feel kind of lost, and we don't know what to do. We don't know where to turn. We don't know how to proceed. And I call that as sort of being in a wilderness, okay? Or being bewildered, or being in the bewilderness. And so in our walk through life, there are these stages that we bump up against times when we're unsure, and we can be even very afraid of what lies ahead for us, because we don't know. We're in the wilderness of what's next. And it's usually a time where we're leaving something that is familiar. We're moving out into an unknown, if you will. We're moving beyond our comfort zone, beyond what is safe, beyond what is familiar, beyond what has been predictable for us. It's moving us out of a sense of feeling secure. Our fears come up, and we're just moving into the uncertain realm of the unknown. Have you ever been there? Okay, you have. I know you have. And actually, Webster's dictionary says a wilderness is a tract, T-R-A-C-T, or region uncultivated and uninhabited by human beings. That's a wilderness. Also refers to it as an empty or pathless area or region. So it's a wilderness that has no path. Nobody's been that way. It's not cultivated yet when we think in terms of an outer wilderness. But at the same time, you know, we have our own inner wilderness. We have areas where in life we have within ourselves aspects that are uncultivated, dimensions of ourselves that have not been developed. And there are paths that we have not been on as yet, that are kind of pathless areas and regions. And so we have to find our way. And so anytime that we have a big change in our life, whether it's wanted or not wanted, whether it's anticipated or unanticipated, that big change involves sometimes things that are new and different. And it can be emotionally difficult for us as we deal with that unknown, heading into the wilderness of a new experience. And so there are many choices and decisions. Yeah, see, there's one big choice and decision that child is making and already in the wilderness. But really, it brings up questions. You know, when we're heading into those areas, it brings up questions about ourselves. We may question ourselves. We may question life. We may question God. We may have all kinds of questions when we go through those scary areas of the unknown. And an example would be actually even when you're leaving high school. I remember back to when I was leaving high school, I was kind of in a wilderness area. I really didn't want to leave high school. I wanted to cling to what was known. It had been fun. It was great. It was predictable. I had a lot of friends. It was gravy, you know. And I didn't know what lied ahead. It was like, I'm going to have to now grow up. I'm going to have to actually, get out there, make a living, make some choices, whatever. And I had no clue as to what it was that I wanted to do. So there were all these decisions. Should I go to college, not to college? What college should I go to? What do I want to study? What do I want to become? What do I want to major in? Where are my interests? I don't know. What am I supposed to do? Should I take over my parents' business? They had a business, Or should we do what our parents want, or should we try and follow our heart's desire? I didn't know what that was. My parents weren't pushing me in anything. I had all of these things. Should I get a job and work a couple years first and make the money, then go on to school? It's different for everyone. And some actually are blessed to know at an early age, this is what I'm going to do. This is where my interest lies. This is what I want to study. This is what I want to become. Some people, some souls have that, and maybe some of you have. And if you don't, it's a little different kind of a wilderness that I went through, at least, finding my way for a period of time. And then there are those who benefit by the fact they don't have to worry about the financial support. It's there, and so they're able to move without a concern there. Another example would be a person that loses their job, and let's say they've been working at that company for 20 years. They thought that's where they would retire. They felt secure, and all of a sudden they're laid off unexpectedly, big change. And what that brings to the individual is a sense of anger. It was not anticipated. They're bitter. They thought others should have been laid off before me. I've been here. I worked hard. I gave it extra hours, worked overtime. I did this, that, and the other. And they build up this storyline in their mind. And now I have to decide what to do. And now I'm in the wilderness. Should I change careers? Should I go back to school? Should I move geographically where there's more jobs? Should I do this? Should I do that? I begin to doubt myself. Why did they let me go? Is there something wrong with me? Da-da-da-da-da-da. And so through the bitterness and the resentment, possibly, the doubting of oneself, it's a wilderness. And these kinds of things happen to us in life when we have changes come along that we didn't necessarily ask for. It's a wilderness. And that person will be in that wilderness with that storyline as long as they continue to, in their mind, stay with the story, and as long as they keep telling others that story of woe. Because until we stop telling the story, it's going to live on and hold us in a stuck position. There's a statement that I learned some time ago, I don't remember where, and it basically is this: you know you are healed when you stop talking about it. You know that you are healed when you stop talking about it. And that means stop talking about it to yourself in your own mind, and stop soliciting an alliance of people around to say, oh yeah, you got hammered there. That was not fair. And so that keeps you stuck. But the thing that we need to do is get back to our spiritual compass. And we have to reestablish a contact with this presence and power that we know is wise and is leading and guiding us. There is a level of trust that life requires us to move into. It just does. It's a part of the dimension of a spiritual path. And so other circumstances that individuals can face in their life that seemingly can be like a wilderness can be things like retirement. A person moves into retirement, their identity, what it is that they've done, their line of work, whatever, all of a sudden it's like, well, now who am I? I'm not my job anymore. That's who I always seem to be. And you're kind of maybe in a wilderness for a period of time. Some actually decide, hey, this was great for a year, and I think I'm going back to work. And so they might study in something else, or they might get something back into their line of work, whatever. And that's okay, that's great. But there can be a wilderness period of time just in that alone. Another wilderness area can be an illness or a major health challenge that brings on an internal struggle of a wilderness of sorts. There are many decisions that may come along with that. What type of treatment should I get? What's the procedure? What's the timing of this? Should I do surgery or not do surgery? What remedies and cures are there available relative to what I'm facing? On and on, all the different input that we get from friends and family as to what we should do. There's just a wilderness of things. And certainly a divorce or any kind of a loss of a significant relationship can bring on a wilderness for a person, trying to find themselves as to where do I go from here? What's my life going to be? What lies up ahead? This is territory that I've not been down before. I've got to kind of find my way. The mind spins with all kinds of chatter as to why, how, when, what, a lot of things going on. Even a midlife crisis. I won't ask you to raise your hand if you're in one, or if you've been to one. I have. All right. Years ago, around the age of 40, I had come up with something very normal, actually. Any psychologist will tell you, many a person between the ages of, somewhere in their 30s and 50s, and maybe even beyond, somewhere at the midpoint of your life, you assess the decisions and choices you made early on. And you think in terms of, well, my life is sort of half over. And here are the choices and decisions I made. And so everything is thrown up in the air. And it's like, now what's the second half of my life going to be? And so it is like a wilderness. And it was for me for a period of time. It just is. And it's very unsettling, and it can be very confusing. And it's a new path into a wilderness that you've not been into. And so that's another one. In the Webster's dictionary, the definition of bewilder or bewildered means to cause to lose one's bearings. We all lose our bearings one time or another. We have to find them again, of course. We have to find the spiritual compass again. Another definition to that is to perplex or confuse, especially by a complexity, variety, or multitude of considerations. You get what I'm saying? Should I do this? Should I do that? There's this, that. There's so many choices, so many decisions, so many voices in my head. It's like a wilderness. And so when we go through these kinds of crises, there seems to be this extreme focus oftentimes on what's outer that we're facing, the external. And we forget that there is something that's wanting to lead and guide us. And it's always there. That the good we seek is seeking us. As the 23rd Psalm says, surely goodness and mercy shall follow you all the days of your life. Good is following you everywhere. But are you opening to it? Sometimes it feels very uncomfortable as life is wanting to usher us into that next higher, greater good of some sort, or to learn whatever is there to learn. And so it's a process. The Course in Miracles has a workbook, and the workbook has different lessons, and it has an affirmation and kind of a body of information about that teaching. And one of the affirmations that I love in that workbook is, God's voice speaks to me all through the day. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. But am I listening? Am I listening? Surely goodness and mercy, goodness shall follow you all the days of your life. But am I listening? The voice of good and my highest good is always speaking to me, but am I listening? It's designed, that passage or that teaching, to really keep our mind open to the idea that at all times the goal is to remember to listen to God's voice inside of you and to discover what God's will is for your next highest good, your next stride forward, whatever it is that you are here to learn. And that emphasis, that idea of always pausing, stopping, listening, and being connected to the divine is built into a very powerful and clear story biblically. And perhaps you know it already. It's the story about Moses, because it's really about a wilderness. And Moses, is leading the Israelites out of slavery and out of bondage. So stop and think here for a moment. That's a historical story. But really, metaphysically, it's a story about you and me in consciousness. It's really talking about Moses is an aspect of the highest in you, the higher voice, that wants to take you and move you out of states of limitation where you've not been free and you've not been happy. You've been in some form of your own bondage, all right? And the body, the nation of the Israelites, represents all the thoughts within the framework of your consciousness. Okay, so now go with me through this story in terms of what goes on within you and within me. The first obstacle was the Red Sea, right? When the people saw Pharaoh's army coming. So now this Moses in me, this thought said, I could actually do this. I could actually be free. I could maybe go for this higher idea in myself. I was a little shaky on it. I'm not sure I wanted to go. Moses had to pry the people, which was the fullness of one's mind and its obstacles, out of Egypt. And so we went, and now there's the Red Sea, and doggone it, they started to murmur and complain. What did you do, Moses? You got us out here to die. That's the chatter of the mind. Immediately goes into fear. All the other thoughts you had that were resisting going forward with your life. It's like that. But what does Moses do? Moses represents the part of us that is to trust in that something higher, that higher voice that Moses speaks for. And he says, okay, fear not, stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord, that he will work for you today. So get beyond your fear and take a stand and commit to a greater good that's trying to happen. Because surely goodness is following you, and you will see it today if you open yourself to that space, that possibility. Something good is trying to happen here. The good you seek is seeking you. And so something opens. In this case, it was a sea. The sea opened. It simply represents symbolically the fact that something will happen in your life when you get to the place of absolute trust and letting go and surrender. It just does. You don't have to know what it is. It can seemingly be miraculous. It can be out of the blue. But that's the teaching. And so Moses represents that in us that listens for and hears the voice of truth and must stand not in fear, but stand in a commitment to trusting and to allowing that which saves us from our limitation to open up. So right after crossing the Red Sea, what happens? The Israelites, they went into a wilderness, right? They went into a wilderness. And it was in Exodus 15 where it reads, then Moses led Israel onward from the Red Sea, and they went into the wilderness of Shur, it says, S-H-U-R. And so they were no more than 3 days into the wilderness, and they found no water. So, okay, they came to a place called Marah, M-A-R-A-H, where they found water, but the water was bitter, and they couldn't drink it. So guess what did the people do? What did the mind do? Oh, another problem. Good grief. See, I shouldn't have listened to that higher thought in me that's leading me to somewhere. They started to murmur in fear. And so Moses, again, it says within the passage, he looked to the divine, again, that which represents always connecting back to your spiritual compass. And he was guided to take a tree stump or branch and throw it into the water. And it turned the bitter water sweet. And the lesson is that basically, if you look inside first, as Moses displayed, it will always show you something to do externally next that will turn your life from bitter to sweet. It's always a movement from inside out, from the within out. Okay, you got that? All right. So you get the lessons, the powerful lessons that are in here that are about you and me and the life we're living today, not just a historical something that took place thousands of years ago. You getting that? That's not very strong, yeah. Okay. All right. So the next chapter, we are told they went from that wilderness into another wilderness with new problems. Okay? So what happened? This time they were hungry and there was no food. What did the people do? They murmured. Okay, you're getting it, and you're now understanding your mind. And so it went on, the murmuring. You took us out here to die. There's no food and so forth. And so Moses, again, checks in with God. Okay, and God says, no problem. I'll have bread rain from heaven for your breakfast, and I'll make you quail for dinner. And so Moses, again, delivers, or God delivers, really. And so in the evening, it states in the passage, quail came and covered the camp. Okay, so who knows how that happened? It's the story. It's making the point, okay? Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But then in the morning, there was this substance on the ground, which they called manna, which means, what is it? And it was, it was a very sticky substance that was produced from the tamarisk tree, but it was edible. And so again, another evidence of another wilderness, a not knowing, a blazing a trail, again looking to God, and God delivering where it's trusted. And so this goes on and on, okay? So metaphysically, Moses always represents that part of our mind that listens for the voice of God, is able to trust, even in the murmuring and the doubts of the other thoughts that want to intrude and ask, why did we do this? Why is this happening to me? And get caught up in yesterday. Whereas Moses is said to be he who brought the law. He brought the Ten Commandments. He brought many other laws, and which symbolizes the idea that always there are universal spiritual laws and principles that you can turn to, and if you will apply them, doors will open. The sea will open. Manna from heaven will occur. Things unanticipated, and you don't even have to know exactly what it is. You just move into a trust that it can and that it will. You know, this idea of 40 years in the wilderness, they weren't necessarily there for 40 years. 40 is a number that means basically it symbolizes the amount of time it takes for completion, okay? There are many references to this number, and it basically, Jesus, you know, was led by the Spirit for 40 days and 40 nights into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And what that symbolizes, he was starting out on his ministry. It was just before beginning out into the wilderness of a new ministry to humanity. And he had to go apart and really go through this wilderness of making choices and decisions within himself. And what did the devil, which really only represents the ego mind, the ego that is edging out God, that is always arguing for separation through fear. So he had to deal with that. That was the human side of him, okay? And so it wasn't necessarily 40 days and 40 nights. It was the amount of time necessary for him to get clear and not go with those thoughts that were always projecting him out in terms of what he could do egoically, or what he could do following something internally, which was of the truth. It's a whole nother lesson, but it's very, very powerful. But the idea that he may have been really in the wilderness for 1 day, 2 days, but it just symbolized it was the amount of time necessary for him to resolve whatever issues that he had before taking a stand that was firm and trusting and going forward to do what he was called to do, something we all have to do. And so in Deuteronomy, there's a verse that says, thy foot swelled these 40 years. Do you really think that you have a swollen foot for 40 years, that's what it's saying? No, it's saying that essentially it took 40 years before it was healed. No, it wasn't 40 years. It took whatever amount of time was necessary. You get what I'm saying? And so other passages had things like the land had rest 40 years. That means there was no wars going on in that land for a period of time. They don't have a clue how long. So they just say 40, however long it was. Even in Psalms 95, 40 years I loathed. Who wants to loathe for 40 years? Okay? It's like until you're over loathing, or you're done loathing. Okay? So it's however long it takes to complete an internal healing, to let go of something, to come to an inner resolve, to find peace and strength in God. If Peggy Sue and Billy Blue broke up their engagement, okay? They were going to get married and now the engagement is off, and you ask, how long is Peggy Sue going to be heartbroken? I might answer, 40 years. 40 years. And I don't mean 40 years. I just mean, I don't know. It's however long Peggy Sue wants to hang on to that and until she resolves it and moves on. We can never predict how long it takes for any individual to heal and get beyond being stuck in whatever issue they're facing. So it's always going to be 40-something, 40 days and nights, 40 years, 40. However, whatever amount of time it takes, uniquely you. Got it? All right. This talk will not be 40 years long. It'll be as long as it needs to be. There was a minister that was, young minister, was heading on into ministry, and he met this older man, and this older man gave him some advice in a story. He said, when my son was small, we often walked together out through the fields and neighboring pastures beyond the parsonage. And so my little boy would hold my little finger, and it would slip off, and he would fall. And whether it was he'd dusted the dirt off or the snow, whatever the case may be, and he would grab onto my little finger a little bit tighter. But again, he would fall, and this went on at various times, and I was lost in my thoughts as a minister and didn't think too much of it. And finally one day he said, "Daddy," and I said, "Yes, son." And he said, "I think if you would hold my hand, I wouldn't fall." And the minister turned to the young man and he said, "You know, he still stumbled many times after that, but he never hit the ground. Don't try to hold on to him," meaning God. "Let him hold on to you." Because you see, as we're growing and unfolding, our grip sometimes grows weak, and we're not able to. And the outer external things that come up just allow us to slide loose of our grip of the divine. And what he's saying is there's a shift in your thinking when you think in terms of God has your whole being. God has hold of you. It's not me clinging to God. There's a different shift and a different power in that. In the Course in Miracles, it teaches God is the strength in which I trust. There is a strength way beyond your human strength of your muscles or your human body. It's an inner strength that will see you through always. God is the voice that speaks to you all through the day, and God is the strength in which you are meant to trust. Whatever the wilderness that you may be facing, whatever the wilderness you have faced, whatever wildernesses that may come up, because life is a matter of facing new, undiscovered realms and situations in which we have no other choice but to trust our connection to the all-knowing, the one that will see you through. God bless you all.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. Unity is inclusive, welcoming people of all walks of life in dignity and love. We believe that love, strength, and goodness dwells within you. May we all live in unity with God, humanity, and all of God's creation. And remember, as Reverend Caesar says, life is meant to be good.
When you visit Unity of Houston, you'll find a spiritual community, a church where you can connect and learn and grow with a progressive approach to Christianity. At Unity, we welcome you no matter what your beliefs. You'll find a teaching, loving, inspiring experience as we help each other be all we're created to be. Check us out. We'd love to have you. Find us online at unityhouston.org, and remember, life is meant to be good.